So how can I get my students settled before they even enter the classroom? What can I do to make that happen?
Well, one of the things that you definitely need to do, you need to make sure that you have your temperature checks. And what I mean by temperature checks, you got to make sure that you greet your students at the door, look them in the face, so that you can gauge their social and emotional well-being. The reason that this is important is because some students, they may have experienced trauma before
Mhm.
entering your classroom. And also prior to coming to the classroom, they may have not have had such a positive interaction with their previous teacher, and so you want to make sure you get a good gauge on your students, because if they have negative energy outside of your classroom, they are going to bring that negative energy inside of your classroom, which can transfer to other students in the classroom. And then we got a whole mess on our hands. So it's important to make sure that we gauge those temperature checks and make
Mhm.
sure we know where our students are on a social and emotional level. Another thing, you just want to make sure before they enter the classroom, you are reiterating those classroom procedures. You're letting them know, okay, guys, remember when we come into the classroom, we enter on a voice level 0. And again, that goes back to what I talked about earlier. You have to make sure that students are hearing this consistently. You're going to
Yes.
sound like a broken record, but they need that consistency. And, the final reason, you have to build relationships. And a lot of people sometimes they don't know, what that means when we say build relationships. Well, you have to learn what your students' interests are. And what I like to call it is that small talk as they enter the classroom.
Mhm.
Just giving you an example. Did you watch the basketball game last night? Or one thing that I love to do when I go into schools is
Mhm.
compliment young ladies' hair. Oh my goodness, your braids are so pretty, or your
Yes.
outfit is so pretty.
Yes.
Building that relationship. And teachers also need to make sure, in order to help build and bridge these relationships, that they provide their students with student interest inventories, find out what their likes are. And, don't just take those inventories and use those as filler times. Actually look at it so that you can make that connection with students to build those relationships. And, by you doing that, students see that you are human and you are making those human connections with them.
Well, Dr. Mills, you really, that was high level. You hit it. You said greet them at the door, and you're checking for trauma. You mentioned social emotional learning, consistency, relationships, and interest inventories, and all of these are excellent ways for teachers to get to know their students and to establish routines and procedures. But it also takes patience for this piece.
Yes, this is not something that's going to, happen overnight. You just have to, just keep at it, just
Mhm.
keep at it. And eventually the kids, they're going to come around. And, when I go back to the building relationship piece, because that is so important. Again, we
Yes,
always say build relationships, build relationships. There are different ways to build relationships,
absolutely.
just actually, maybe spending time with them during lunch, or, talking to them during a class change, or if you see them in the hallway, just having that little small talk, because that goes a long way with the child. Because if you do that, the child says to his or herself, oh my goodness, they see me. And
Mhm.
children want to be seen, in a positive light.
Absolutely. And new teachers have this tendency, and seasoned teachers, that when the school year starts, they have a pacing guide, they have curriculums, and they're just ready to jump in and get started. And
Exactly.
this is called going slow so that you can go fast. There are several researchers out there that's done the work at the elementary level. They say 6 plus 36, take the first 6 weeks of school to establish routines and procedures. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not teaching or that you're not covering the curriculum. It just
Mhm.
means that you're making sure that as you do that, you're making sure that you keep routines and procedures and culture and climate at the top of consciousness. What would you say to new teachers or even seasoned teachers at this point that they feel like they are in a space where they have to just jump in and get started? What do you do to take that step back and slow down and see the humanity of our students and make sure that we're practicing the routines and procedures and not just jumping into the curriculum? What strategy would you give them to do that?
Well, I like to use this analogy about purchasing a new car. When you purchase a new car, you don't just jump into that new car and just drive off. You have to adjust the mirrors, you have to adjust your seat, adjust the radio. So it's the same thing in a classroom. You know, when you first jump in, you're going to constantly be making those adjustments all throughout the school year. May be making adjustments the entire school year, you know, adjusting seating, adjusting where you're going to position yourself, adjusting where you're going to place, you know, particular students because this student doesn't get along with this student. So, you know, just constantly making those adjustments throughout the year. You know, just take your time because it's not going to happen all at once. You're going to always be making adjustments. I'll still make adjustments right now in my car, and I've had my car, you know, forever. So I'm
Yes.
still adjusting that mirror, adjusting that radio. So it's the same thing in the classroom. You have to look at it the same way.
Yes. And I like that analogy because I was thinking that every time we take our car to the shop, when the mechanic get in and do things, when we get back in, we have to readjust because they may have driven it or they may have had to move it and they had to adjust the seats. So it's just like when the administration come in for an evaluation or an observation and they give you feedback, you just adjust. Don't take it
Exactly.
personal. Just know that that's the mechanic helping you to get better. So thank you so much for those analogies, Dr. Mills.